Negative utilitarianism. Imagine a world where the highest moral aim isn't to increase happiness, but to reduce suffering. That's the core of negative utilitarianism, a compelling and controversial ethical framework. Unlike classical utilitarianism, which seeks to maximize happiness overall, negative utilitarianism shifts focus entirely to suffering, asserting that reducing or eliminating pain should take priority over increasing pleasure. The foundation of this philosophy lies in the understanding that suffering holds a unique moral weight. While happiness adds value to life, suffering, whether physical or emotional, can be far more intense and demanding of ethical attention. A moment of joy may be fleeting, but pain often dominates a person's entire experience. One of the early supporters of this view, philosopher Karl Popper, argued that minimizing misery and suffering should come before efforts to increase happiness. His reasoning was that alleviating pain has a direct and immediate impact on improving the quality of life for those in distress. Negative utilitarianism pushes us to critically evaluate how we weigh happiness against suffering. In many everyday cases, the emphasis on reducing pain feels intuitive. Providing food and shelter, medical care for the ill, or mental health support all clearly align with this framework, as they directly reduce suffering and enhance well-being. But negative utilitarianism doesn't stop at individual situations. It invites us to think globally, even existentially. One of its more controversial implications is that if suffering outweighs happiness in the world, extreme actions might be morally justified to prevent future suffering. Some interpretations propose that, if life inherently includes suffering, the moral response might be to avoid bringing new lives into existence. This concept overlaps with antinatalist philosophy, which argues against procreation to prevent potential pain. Such ideas raise uncomfortable and profound questions about existence and the morality of creating life in a world where suffering is inevitable. Critics of negative utilitarianism often point to its potential for extreme outcomes. They worry that a strict commitment to eliminating suffering could lead to decisions that dismiss the importance of joy, meaning, and fulfillment. Taken to its extreme, the logic of negative utilitarianism might even justify eradicating all sentient life to avoid future suffering, an unsettling conclusion that reveals the inner tension of the philosophy. Most who support negative utilitarianism, however, reject these extreme interpretations. Still, they acknowledge that the philosophy raises difficult and necessary questions about how we respond to pain and how we define ethical priorities. Another challenge lies in how we measure suffering. Pain is deeply subjective. It varies from person to person, across situations and cultures. What is unbearable to one may be tolerable to another. This subjectivity complicates the consistent application of negative utilitarianism, particularly on a societal scale. How do we compare suffering between individuals or communities? How do we balance short-term pain against long-term well-being? Despite these complexities, negative utilitarianism provides a powerful ethical lens. It encourages us to prioritize suffering in our moral calculations, especially when resources are scarce and decisions are difficult. In fields like global health, this approach can help direct aid toward the most severe conditions or crises, ensuring that those in the greatest distress receive attention first. On a personal level, negative utilitarianism invites us to rethink our cultural attitudes toward suffering. While society often romanticizes hardship as a path to growth or achievement, this framework emphasizes compassion and care. It asks us to see the alleviation of pain not as a weakness, but as a moral necessity. By acknowledging suffering's moral urgency, we nurture empathy and a deeper sense of responsibility. The goal isn't to deny the value of happiness, but to ensure that in seeking it, we don't ignore those in pain. Ultimately, negative utilitarianism confronts the darkest parts of human experience with honesty. It reminds us that small acts of care can make a real difference. Although the philosophy invites difficult debates and sometimes uncomfortable conclusions, it highlights a universal truth. Alleviating suffering is a fundamental human endeavor, one that crosses all cultures and beliefs. It doesn't ask us to abandon the pursuit of joy, but to make sure that in seeking it, we remember those who suffer most. The paradox of freedom. Freedom is a core aspiration of humanity, yet it is often burdened with contradictions. The paradox of freedom lies in the tension between our desire for complete autonomy and the inevitable constraints that make freedom meaningful. It's a concept that has perplexed philosophers, writers, and thinkers throughout history, revealing that freedom is not as simple as it seems. Imagine a world where you could do absolutely anything. No laws, no expectations, no responsibilities. At first, it might sound exhilarating, but it would quickly become overwhelming. Without structure or boundaries, choices lose their significance. If everything is permissible, nothing feels truly meaningful. This is the paradox. Absolute freedom can feel like no freedom at all. For freedom to matter, it must exist within limits. This paradox becomes clearer when we examine the relationship between freedom and responsibility. To be free is to have choices, but with choices come consequences. True freedom means owning those consequences. Yet, the weight of responsibility can feel restrictive. The more freedom we have, the more responsibility we bear, creating a delicate balance. For example, when a society grants individuals the freedom to speak and act as they wish, it must also establish systems of accountability to prevent harm. These rules, though they may appear to limit freedom, are what enable it to thrive. Philosophers like Jean-Paul Sartre explored this tension through existentialism, emphasizing the burden of freedom. Sartre argued that humans are condemned to be free, meaning we are forced to confront the full weight of our choices without the comfort of predetermined paths. This absolute freedom can feel paralyzing. If everything is a choice, how do we know what is right or meaningful? Sartre believed the answer lies in creating our own values, but this process is neither easy nor comforting. Freedom, in this sense, is both empowering and terrifying. Another layer of the paradox emerges when we consider freedom in the context of relationships and society. Humans are inherently social beings, and true freedom cannot exist in isolation. Yet our interactions with others inevitably involve compromise. To live in harmony, we must sometimes limit our own freedom for the sake of others. This tension is evident in debates about laws and governance. While laws restrict individual behavior, they also create the stability necessary for collective freedom. Without laws, society would descend into chaos, where the strong dominate the weak, and true freedom becomes impossible for most. Freedom also interacts with desire in paradoxical ways. When people think of freedom, they often imagine the ability to fulfill their desires without interference. But desires themselves can become a form of bondage. Addiction, obsession, or even the relentless pursuit of success can trap us in cycles of dependency, eroding our sense of autonomy. In this way, unrestrained freedom to follow our impulses can lead to a loss of deeper freedom, the ability to act in alignment with our true selves. This idea is central to the philosophy of Stoicism, which teaches that true freedom comes not from external circumstances, but from mastery over our internal states. By cultivating self-discipline and focusing on what is within our control, we free ourselves from being enslaved by external events or emotions. For the Stoics, freedom is not the absence of constraints, but the ability to navigate them with wisdom and integrity. The paradox of freedom also manifests in the modern world's obsession with choice. We live in an era of unprecedented options, endless career paths, products, and lifestyles. But this abundance of choice can lead to decision fatigue and dissatisfaction. Psychologists have found that too many options often make people feel less satisfied with their choices, as they constantly wonder if a better option was left behind. In this way, the pursuit of unlimited freedom can paradoxically make us feel trapped, uncertain, and unfulfilled. Cultural and historical contexts further complicate the paradox. In many societies, freedom has been framed as liberation from oppression, whether political, economic, or social. Yet even in the pursuit of liberation, new structures of power and control often emerge. Revolutions that overthrow tyrannical regimes sometimes replace them with equally oppressive systems, revealing that the pursuit of freedom is fraught with unintended consequences. The desire for freedom can lead to its very erosion. On a more personal level, the paradox of freedom plays out in our relationship with ourselves. We often think of freedom as doing whatever we want, but sometimes what we want in the moment conflicts with our long-term goals. Discipline and self-restraint might feel like limitations, but they are often what enable us to achieve meaningful freedom over time. A musician who practices for hours every day may sacrifice leisure, but that discipline allows them the freedom to express themselves fully through their art. Similarly, choosing to adhere to certain principles or commitments can provide a sense of purpose that unrestrained freedom cannot. The paradox also challenges how we view progress. Technological advancements often promise greater freedom, freedom to communicate, travel, and access information. Yet these same technologies can become tools of surveillance, distraction, or dependence. Social media, for instance, offers freedom of expression, but can also trap us in echo chambers or addictive behaviors. The tools we create to liberate ourselves can become the very chains that bind us. Ultimately, the paradox of freedom forces us to confront the complexity of human existence. Freedom is not about the absence of constraints, but about finding balance within them. It is about recognizing that boundaries and responsibilities are not the enemies of freedom, but its foundation. True freedom is not infinite choice or unrestrained action. It is the ability to live in alignment with our values, to navigate life's constraints with purpose, and to find meaning in the delicate balance between autonomy and connection. The paradox of freedom is not a problem to be solved, but a reality to be embraced. It challenges us to think deeply about what we value, how we live, and what it truly means to be free. Far from diminishing freedom, this paradox enriches it, reminding us that the most profound forms of liberty come not from escaping limitations, but from understanding and working within them. The problem of suffering. Why does suffering exist? If we live in a world capable of producing beauty, joy, and love, why is it also filled with pain, loss, and cruelty? This question, known as the problem of suffering, has haunted humanity for centuries. It challenges our understanding of existence, morality, and even the nature of the universe itself. At its heart, the problem of suffering isn't just about why suffering happens, but what it means and how we are meant to respond to it. Suffering takes many forms, from the physical pain of injury to the emotional anguish of heartbreak and loss. It is an undeniable part of the human condition. woven deeply into the fabric of existence. What makes suffering especially perplexing is its universality. No one is immune, whether rich or poor, powerful or powerless. Every sentient being endures suffering in some form. This shared reality provokes profound questions. Is suffering necessary? Is it random? Or is there a deeper purpose behind it? Philosophers and thinkers have explored this issue in different ways. For those who believe in a higher power, suffering poses a theological challenge. If God is both all-powerful and all-loving, why does suffering persist? This dilemma, often referred to as the problem of evil, has sparked centuries of debate. Some suggest that suffering is a test of faith or a tool for spiritual growth. Others argue it is the result of human free will, a necessary consequence of our capacity to choose. Yet such explanations often feel insufficient. They may account for some types of suffering but falter when faced with the vast scale of pain in the world, natural disasters, disease, and tragedies that seem random and undeserved. Secular viewpoints typically focus on suffering's biological and evolutionary roots. Pain, for example, plays a crucial role in alerting living beings to danger. Without the ability to feel pain, a person might not remove their hand from a flame or recognize the symptoms of illness. Emotional suffering has survival value too. Fear protects us from threats, while grief helps us process loss and move forward. From this angle, suffering is not divine punishment or moral failure, but an essential part of how life is structured. Still, understanding suffering's function doesn't make it easier to bear. It leaves us asking, why must life be built on such a fragile foundation? Existentialist philosophers like Friedrich Nietzsche and Jean-Paul Sartre viewed suffering as an unavoidable part of life, one that forces us to seek meaning in a universe that offers none by default. Nietzsche famously said, "To live is to suffer. To survive is to find some meaning in the suffering." For him, suffering was not something to flee from, but to face and transcend, a forge through which we find strength and purpose. Sartre, by contrast, saw suffering as tied to human freedom. Our capacity to choose, to hope, and to dream inevitably exposes us to disappointment and despair. In his view, suffering is inseparable from the richness of the human experience. It is the cost of truly living. Buddhist philosophy offers another lens, placing suffering at the very center of its teachings. The Buddha identified suffering, or dukkha, as the first of the Four Noble Truths. According to Buddhism, suffering arises from desire and attachment, our cravings for pleasure, permanence, and control. These longings conflict with the impermanent, ever-changing nature of reality, leading to dissatisfaction and pain. The Buddhist path seeks to reduce suffering through mindfulness, ethical conduct, and the cultivation of wisdom. While it doesn't eliminate all pain, it equips us with tools to understand and manage it, offering a route toward inner peace. Modern psychology also sheds light on suffering by examining how our minds perceive and intensify pain. Research shows that much of our suffering stems not from the events themselves, but from the narratives we construct around them. For instance, losing a job is undeniably hard, but the emotional suffering is often amplified by thoughts like, "I'm a failure," or "I'll never succeed." Cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT, and mindfulness techniques aim to disrupt these patterns, helping people reframe their experiences and reduce the emotional weight of suffering. In recent years, the problem of suffering has taken on new dimensions with advances in artificial intelligence and transhumanism. Some theorists believe that suffering might eventually be eliminated through technology, perhaps by redesigning the brain or creating digital environments free from pain. Yet this vision opens ethical and philosophical dilemmas. If we could remove suffering entirely, should we? Or would we be losing something essential in the process? Something suffering teaches us about ourselves. Ultimately, the problem of suffering isn't just an abstract or intellectual challenge. It's a deeply personal one. Each of us confronts suffering in our own lives, struggling to understand its meaning and impact. Some find comfort in faith or philosophy, others in relationships, or in the pursuit of justice. What unites us is the shared effort to make sense of pain, to find meaning in hardship, and to keep hoping for something better. Suffering is a paradox. It is both universal and deeply personal, both necessary and unbearable. It reveals life's fragility, but also its resilience. While we may never fully resolve the problem of suffering, how we face it shapes who we are. Perhaps the greatest lesson of suffering is its power to connect us, to remind us of our shared humanity, and to inspire compassion, courage, and a relentless pursuit of understanding. Misanthropy in philosophy. Philosophy often grapples with the flaws of humanity so deeply, in fact, that some philosophers have questioned whether humanity even deserves its place in the world. Misanthropy, the distrust and criticism of humanity, has long been a recurring theme in philosophical thought. It challenges how we understand ourselves, our values, and our impact on the world. Importantly, misanthropy in philosophy is not about hating individual people. Rather, it involves questioning humanity as a collective, its tendencies, decisions, and the consequences of its actions. Philosophical misanthropy is more than mere cynicism or bitterness. It is a serious and structured critique of human nature. It examines how humanity fails to live up to its own ideals, often by focusing on the harm we cause ourselves, each other, and the environment. For philosophers like Arthur Schopenhauer, misanthropy arose from a profound skepticism about human behavior. Schopenhauer viewed human beings as driven by the will to live, a blind and insatiable force that leads to endless striving, competition, and suffering. In his view, humans are not guided by reason or virtue, but are largely governed by selfish motives and irrational desires. Friedrich Nietzsche, another key figure, took a different approach. Although he criticized humanity for its herd mentality and its tendency to seek comfort in mediocrity, he did not reject humanity entirely. Instead, Nietzsche regarded these flaws as obstacles to be overcome. His form of misanthropy was not a dismissal of the human race, but a challenge, a call for transformation and self-overcoming, urging people to rise above their limitations. Philosophical misanthropy often emerges from deep disappointment. The ancient Greek philosopher Diogenes of Sinope, a central figure in cynicism, is well known for his scathing critiques of human hypocrisy and vanity. He is famously said to have wandered the streets with a lantern, searching for an honest man. Diogenes rejected the social norms and materialism of his era, believing that humanity's obsession with wealth, power, and status had eroded its moral character. His misanthropy sprang not from hatred but from frustration at humanity's failure to live authentically and virtuously. Jean-Jacques Rousseau, while more optimistic, also voiced misanthropic ideas in his critique of civilization. Rousseau believed that humans were inherently good in their natural state, but had been corrupted by society. He argued that modern civilization, in its pursuit of progress, had alienated people from their true selves, resulting in inequality, greed, and moral decline. Although Rousseau's misanthropy targeted the societal system rather than individuals, it also held a hope for redemption through a return to simplicity and harmony with nature. In contemporary philosophy, misanthropy often centers on humanity's impact on the environment. Environmental philosophers such as Arne Inneses and advocates of the deep ecology movement argue that humanity's exploitation of the natural world reflects a harmful anthropocentrism, an assumption that humans are superior and central to all life. From this viewpoint, humanity is seen as a destructive force, prioritizing its own interests at the expense of other species and ecosystems. While not all environmentalists are misanthropic, this critique resonates with the broader mistrust of human behavior found in philosophical misanthropy. Misanthropy can also take an existential form, raising questions about whether human existence has any inherent worth. The 20th century philosopher Emile Cioran wrote extensively about the absurdity and futility of life. For Cioran, humanity's relentless quest for meaning often obscured its deeper flaws, its arrogance, destructiveness, and refusal to acknowledge its limitations. Yet even in his bleak reflections, there is a sense of dark humor and a recognition of the contradictions and resilience within the human condition. Critics of philosophical misanthropy argue that it is too harsh or dismissive of humanity's potential. They highlight acts of kindness, creativity, and progress as proof that humans are capable of greatness. While misanthropy underscores humanity's shortcomings, it can sometimes overlook our capacity for compassion, innovation, and perseverance. Nonetheless, many misanthropic philosophers would contend that their position is not an outright condemnation of humanity. Rather, they see it as a confrontation with difficult truths. By acknowledging our failings, they argue we take the first step toward addressing them. One of the most complex aspects of misanthropy is its moral implication. If humanity is fundamentally flawed, what should be done about it? Should we strive to improve, or should we accept our limitations? Philosophers like Nietzsche treated misanthropy as a catalyst for change, encouraging humanity to transcend its weaknesses and embrace its potential. Others, such as Schopenhauer, lean toward resignation, seeing these flaws as innate and unalterable. Philosophical misanthropy forces us to wrestle with difficult questions about who we are and what our future holds. Are our flaws a result of circumstance, or are they intrinsic to human nature? Can we overcome our tendencies toward selfishness, violence, and destruction? Or are these aspects inseparable from what it means to be human? These questions are far from easy, but they are essential to understanding the human condition. Ultimately, misanthropy in philosophy is not about rejecting humanity altogether, but about reflecting honestly on what it means to be human. It invites us to confront our failures, challenge our assumptions, and reconsider our purpose, whether it leads us to despair, hope, or transformation. Philosophical misanthropy compels us to examine ourselves more deeply, and in doing so, urges us not to abandon humanity, but to engage with it more truthfully and thoughtfully than ever before.